Chapter 9. The Advertising Manager and the Sales Department. Advertising has been defined as salesmanship in print, as a substitute for sampling, as a multiplication of contact, in order to reach a larger audience than can be reached by personal salesmanship. In institutional copy, the selling of the idea is frequently the whole job. We want our audience to have a new idea about, or a new attitude toward, our firm. But in copy aimed to promote the sale of goods or services, the idea we want to sell is most often the idea that the goods or services ought to be bought. We invite specific action by our prospects after and as a result of their reading of our copy. Now we are going to devote our attention to another side of the copywriter's job. We are going to consider the relations of the advertising department to the sales department. We are going to discover that preparing and running our advertisements is sometimes only a small part of our whole job. That is an important statement, one to be taken at its full face value. However, it does not in any way minimize the importance of all that is implied in the first 3 paragraphs above. Unless we do prepare advertisements that are aimed consistently at the creation of sales, the rest of our work will be considerably less effective. The fact that there are several important matters in which the advertising manager and the copywriter can render specific help to the sales department does not in any way lessen the copywriter's responsibility on any of the matters thus far discussed. There are, of course, many different setups for a sales department. Every sales department is to some degree peculiar to its special line of business. Any sales department may be further modified by the particular methods of its sales executives. Some firms sell direct to their customers, such firms ranging from those making heavy machinery for industry to those selling either services or popular merchandise direct to the general public. Some firms sell to the public door to door, some through their own stores. Some firms sell to wholesalers, who in turn sell to retailers, who in turn sell to the ultimate consumer. Some firms sell direct to retailers and employ no wholesalers. Perhaps the only generalization we can make regarding a sales staff is that it is a group of men or women whose job it is to sell goods or services to someone through personal salesmanship. We can use the broad term sales promotion to cover all the ways in which the advertising department aids the sales department to do its work. Once upon a time, a manufacturer said, "Advertising can't do me any good. I get sales only by a demonstration of my product in the prospect's factory. On the average, each of my salesmen spends 3 days a week arranging to stage demonstrations, and 2 days a week giving the demonstrations. If he makes 30 calls in the 3 days, he can usually set up 10 demonstrations for the other 2 days. Out of 10 demonstrations, he averages 5 sales. 5 sales a week is profitable to the salesman and to me." This manufacturer was induced to try a new copy policy. The new advertising was written 100% with the objective of arranging for demonstrations. It was not long before each salesman was spending 3 days a week demonstrating. And in those 3 days, he was making 20 demonstrations and averaging 10 sales a week. Once upon a time, there was a manufacturer who had 3 major lines and 3 minor lines. The major lines carried the normal margin of profit and had been successfully advertised for a good many years. The minor lines were, to all practical purposes, byproducts of the major lines. Cost accounting indicated that they could be sold only at a very low price, too low a price to justify either a sales commission or an advertising expenditure. And because they were byproducts, their sale could not be forced ahead of the sales of the major products. In other words, here was a case where volume advertising and selling had no hope of forcing volume sales, and thereby a greater volume of production, and thereby a lower manufacturing cost. A new copy policy was evolved. Each advertisement featured one major product, but each advertisement carried a coupon whereby the reader was given the opportunity to send for further information about the major product, and also one of the minor products. The reader was invited to check whether he wanted information about one or both products. This rapidly evolved into a practice whereby every coupon listed all 3 major products and all 3 minor products. Each advertisement still advertised only one major product, but each coupon gave the reader a chance to indicate by checks his desire for information about any one or more of the 6 products. It soon became evident that the average reader was checking 4.2 products, and this meant that leads for the minor products were now being produced at no extra cost whatever. Once upon a time, a sales manager for a building board found the going tough. His board was considerably higher priced than the average of the industry. It had extra merit, but it did not look appreciably different from most other building boards. For many of the uses to which building board could be put, the extra insulating qualities and the extra structural strength of this board did not seem important to the users. To all practical purposes, this board had become a commodity, yet it still had to be sold at a price considerably above the average of the market. The hero of our present story proceeded to evolve a wholly new method of house construction, in which the use of his particular board was automatically required. In this case, as does happen now and then, the sales manager set the pace and the copywriter rode along to glory. It is not always the copywriter who comes through with the miracle idea, and there is no possible reason for false pride of authorship, nor for any sense of competition between the sales department and the advertising department. There is no more reason for competition between advertising and sales departments than there would be for competition between the pitcher and the catcher on a baseball team. Most good advertising ideas are born out of saturation with all the facts pertaining to the situation. How can you trace authorship of a fact? How can you give credit to each and every person who discovered any of the facts that were pertinent? Moreover, a basic selling idea, whether it is to be used in personal salesmanship or in the copy, is an idea which will be effective with thousands or millions of people. Such an idea is most often born out of the give and take among those who have saturated themselves with the facts, and it's safer that it should be that way. Any sense of competition between the sales and advertising departments can usually be killed if 1. The advertising department will freely state that they expect the sales department to do the selling, and 2. The sales department will fully recognize the fact that advertising is a multiplication or extension of sales effort, but not a substitute. It has long been the contention of old Aesop Glim that the advertising manager is, in fact, an assistant sales manager. If it were not too cumbersome, his title should be Assistant Sales Manager in Charge of Advertising. On this basis, the true relation of advertising to selling is fully recognized. A complete give and take between what the salesman has to offer and what the copywriter has to offer is then possible. The salesman on the firing line feeds ideas back to the copywriter. The copywriter feeds ideas back to the salesman. The advertising thus created represents a complete reflection of the conditions in the field and the methods by which the salesman is operating. Our primary objective is to drive home the fact that the copywriter, who wants to do a complete job, must seek a full understanding of what the salesman is up against. He must get that information at first hand, behind the counter or from the salesman, or even through field trips with the salesman. The copywriter needs to know all the facts pertaining to the case. Some of the most pertinent facts are frequently those having to do with manufacturing costs and with profits. The copywriter or advertising manager who is kept in the dark on any part of the total picture will frequently write copy that is foredoomed to failure. Advertising men and women are soon trained in adaptability, versatility, and coordinating ability. Their everyday duties demand that they be fast on their feet, quick to fit into a new situation, able to discover the relationships between those things that are related, and conversely able to spot false, artificial, or unsound tie-ups between things that are not related. These are probably quite desirable qualities for presidents and production executives, treasurers and sales managers too. But they may not be needed to the same degree in jobs that generally run in more regular, more routine channels than the advertising department ever achieves. Remember World War II, and the labor management committees, and the E-award programs, and all such. The basic purposes of most of these enterprises were in the fields of employee morale and production efficiency, not matters usually associated with advertising. But into whose lap did the work usually fall? Aesop Glim knows of no case in which it was not the advertising managers. He was most often the one person who could always be counted on to move in fast, get the picture straight, coordinate all the parts and implements of the program, and then run traffic control on the whole job. And no one was remotely surprised to find him doing so. Similarly, no one was surprised on the occasions when the advertising manager suggested changing the product and the packaging, having the factory repainted, opening the Pittsburgh office, installing the company cafeteria, adopting the quality control system, or codifying the salesman training program. The differences between advertising department personnel and advertising agency personnel are most often minor, frequently a matter of temperament as to the kind of town in which you want to live. And, of course, advertising men and women move across in either direction between the agency and the department. Perhaps the logical conclusion is that the average advertising man or woman, given a few years' experience, becomes the exceptional jack of all trades who is really good at several. It seems logical to believe that the abilities advertising demands produce a temperament that just can't avoid, one, attracting to it all kinds of work, and two, sticking its nose into all those jobs in which nobody has invited its participation. Whenever a sale of any kind is completed, it is the result of some combination of consumer pull and dealer push. It is never 100% of one and none of the other. If a woman walks into a store and sees an attractive counter display of a product she knows nothing about, if she then asks, "What is that?" you have the maximum of dealer push and the minimum of consumer pull. The dealer has stocked the merchandise and displayed it and is ready to answer questions about it. The consumer has done little more than reach for and pay for the article. But if that woman goes into a store and says, "I would like a bottle of Schmaltz catsup," and the dealer says, "We have none," and she says, "Will you be good enough to stock it for me?" and he says, "Yes," then you have the maximum of consumer pull and the minimum of dealer push. The consumer has been induced to demand a specific brand, to the point where her insistence induces the dealer to stock the merchandise. However, the dealer must still do his important bit before the sale can be completed. The fact that the average sale is always the result of some consumer pull plus some dealer push gives us a clue as to how the copywriter can help the sales department. We must always be looking for ways in which to help the sales department build dealer push as well as consumer pull. It is obviously extravagant to build consumer pull ahead of dealer push. More specifically, it is extravagant to advertise to the consumer in territories in which you have no dealer distribution, or whatever other terminal facilities may be necessary to complete the sale. Obviously, advertising can build consumer pull, build up brand demand, to the point where dealers are asked so often for a certain product that they finally write to the manufacturer and say, "Please send us some of your goods." But this is extravagant because too many consumers will be disappointed and lose interest before the dealers can stock the merchandise. It is sounder economy to build dealer push just ahead of consumer pull. If a dealer has stocked your merchandise with the expectation that your advertising is about to build consumer demand for the merchandise, then you can be reasonably certain that no consumer will ask for the product and not be able to get it. Simultaneously, each sale thus completed builds up the dealer's confidence in the merchandise, makes him more interested in stocking, displaying, and reordering your wares. The dealer wants to stock whatever he's sure to sell. It's the tinkle of his cash register and not the sheer beauty of your goods which dominates his interest. If you haven't the time or the money to do a complete job on both consumer pull and dealer push, put the major emphasis on dealer push. If dealers can be induced to stock and display the merchandise, some sales will usually result. You obviously won't reach as wide an outside audience, but you will have a chance of interesting those who go into the dealer's store. When you write a piece of copy, keep your eye on the main target, all the way. Write directly and exclusively to those who are prospective buyers. When you're sure you've done that job fully, then see if there are any pluses you can put into your copy without weakening it. Are there any statements that can be either emphasized or added to make the laboratory, the factory, or the office staffs, the salesmen, or the dealers feel better about their jobs? If there are, put them in. Your advertising makes a net gain at no additional cost. Now we're going to talk about what the copywriter can do to and with his advertising in order to make the world a happier place for the salesman. First, let us recognize the fact that a salesman's only fully productive time is when he is, 1, face-to-face with a prospect, and 2, talking about the goods. Whatever time he spends waiting to see a prospect or calling, and failing to see a prospect or finally face-to-face, explaining who he and his company are, all that is non-productive time. He can't build up his sales in those ways. So, what can you put into your copy that will help the salesman to get in sooner and oftener? And does your copy pre-sell the firm for him so that he can spend all his face-to-face time talking about the goods and how they fit the prospect's needs? Does your copy mention the fact that the salesman knows his business? What you can do to your copy to help the salesman will always be determined by the situation at hand. Aesop Glim begs you always to ask yourself questions such as those above, to hunt for sensible answers, and then to do just as much to your copy along those lines as you can do without weakening your basic story to those who are prospective buyers. There are several important things to be done with the finished advertisements. The copywriter, the advertising manager, or the sales manager should take it upon himself to sell the advertising to the salesman. Show him what it says. Explain why it says that instead of something else. Then make it clear just what this advertising means to each salesman in his own territory. National figures mean nothing whatever to the salesman who covers only the eastern half of one state. Take the time and the trouble to give him pertinent figures of circulations or sales potentials for the eastern half of his own state. Make him know that this advertising is his assistant salesman right in his own territory. This assistant salesman is calling on his customers and prospects for him before and between his own calls. There is obviously a limit to the number of times the salesman can call in a year on any one prospect or customer. His assistant salesman will make additional calls for him in the next 12 months. It will call on many of his lesser prospects, those he just plain can't afford to call on so often. Here and there, it may even produce an inquiry or a live lead for him. Every salesman knows that it will sometimes be just his luck to be in one end of his territory at the very moment someone in the other end is finally ready to buy. But it's quite possible that his assistant salesman will be the one to keep the order alive until he gets around again. Stranger things than that have happened, haven't they, Mr. Ripley? Don't promise any miracles from the advertising. Don't imply that the advertising will do his work for him. He knows that is not true. Finally, ask the salesman to carry proofs of the advertising and to show these proofs to his customers and prospects. There's extra magic to something in print. There's extra conviction when a firm is willing to put its story into print. There's double conviction when the customer sees that what the salesman has just told him is confirmed by what the advertisement says. As a further and a specifically aimed aid to the salesman, try this plan. Have each salesman give to the sales manager the names of the 2 or 3 key people in each of the firms, which constitute his 25 best customers and his 25 best prospects. Stating this another way, there are 25 firms in his territory from which he is getting his greatest volume of business and which constitute his bread and butter. And there are 25 desirable prospects, firms he is not selling, which represent his best opportunities. In each of these 50 firms, there are 1, 2, or 3 men who decide whether he gets the business. In order to help the salesman keep his 25 best customers sold, and in order to help the salesman soften up his 25 best prospects, the sales manager now promises to write a personal letter every month or every 60 days. The purpose of this letter is to let these customers and prospects know that the salesman is not an orphan, that he really does have a firm back of him and a sales manager who is also interested in holding or securing their business. These letters can express the idea that the firm does or would appreciate their patronage. These letters must build up the salesman to the customer or prospect, make them more anxious to see him when he calls. Finally, each such letter should enclose a reprint of an advertisement. Quite likely, this gives the sales manager the opportunity to emphasize some particular feature about the goods. This is a tested plan. It works. Think back to the first time you saw your name in print. Then recall the first time something you had written appeared in print. Did you get a thrill out of seeing advance proofs of what you had written before it appeared? Have you ever felt that you were being taken behind the scenes, being let in on a secret when someone showed you advance proofs of something he had written? Finally, don't you automatically feel that something which has been reprinted must have had enough importance to make it worth reprinting? There is magic in the printed word. Words in print seem to gain an importance they never had in longhand or typewritten. The final touch of magic lies in advance proofs, clippings, and reprints. We have already recognized the fact that every complete sale is the result of some combination of consumer pull and dealer push. We agreed that the copywriter must always work with the sales department to build both dealer push and consumer pull. We further agreed that when a shortage of time or money prevents an all-out effort on both jobs, we put the greater emphasis on dealer push. So we buy preprints, advanced proofs of our advertisements, and we make it a point to show these preprints to everyone who can help us make the sale. Most of all, this means our dealers. There are several reasons, both positive and negative, for telling the dealer about the advertisements before the campaign starts running. First, we want the dealer to stock our wares so that he will be able to supply the demand we expect our advertisements to create. Stocking and displaying the goods is dealer push. Brand demand is consumer pull. Second, there are bound to be lost motion and lost sales through running a new advertising campaign without telling the dealer about it. This applies even to a new advertising campaign for a product the dealer is already carrying. If the dealer doesn't know about your new advertising campaign, he may be currently displaying competitive merchandise, when he would far rather identify his window with your new advertising. Third, there's the courtesy of giving your dealers a preview of your activities. Fourth, an important negative reason and particularly applicable to the introduction of new goods. There is always the danger that the dealer who doesn't know about your advertising campaign will sell competitive goods to the prospects your advertising creates. Certainly, the danger is double if the dealer hasn't yet stocked your wares. The consumer demand you have so laboriously created then gets diverted into purchases of other wares, with the very great possibility that your prospects will learn to like your competitors' wares. Use preprints of your advertising to build dealer push. We also buy reprints of our advertisements and put them to work. Preprints and reprints might conceivably be printed at one and the same time. The two words are used primarily to emphasize the fact that one batch of proofs is to be used for certain specific purposes before the advertising campaign starts. The second group is to be used after the campaign is started, advertisement by advertisement. If we have a relatively small number of consumer prospects, a few hundred or a few thousand, we can send each of them by mail a reprint of an advertisement. We can accompany that reprint with a letter which says, in essence, we wanted to be sure you didn't miss our current advertisement. What we have actually done is to support the 20,000 copies of our advertisement with an extra copy by mail to each of our best customers and prospects, or all of our customers and prospects. It is the opinion of Aesop Glim that a mailing of this kind should always be under first-class postage and look as much as possible like a personal letter. If, on the other hand, we have a great many thousands of customers, then our use of reprints might take place in our dealers' stores. Today, a fairly large blow-up of an advertisement can be made at low cost and without new art or plate costs. If your dealer is interested in your wares, he will be predisposed to put up an advertisement which identifies his store with your advertisement in magazines or newspapers. Use reprints of your advertising to increase consumer pull. Every dollar you spend in advertising to the general public has two chances to be profitable. You have considerable control over the first chance. It depends upon how effectively you pre-sell your advertising to everyone who can in any way help you make the sale to the ultimate consumer. Tell your own salesmen, tell your brokers, wholesalers, retailers, and their salesmen all about your consumer advertising campaign before you start to run your consumer advertising campaign. Keep telling them about it while it is running. Aesop Glim was a party to the production of one of the earliest big radio shows. This show ran on a Saturday night, which was completely the wrong night for advertising the goods that were featured. The show was almost 100% uninteresting to the general public. It is highly probable that no member of the general public ever heard this show twice. The show cost $20,000 a week. In 13 weeks, it had cost $260,000. The strange fact is that, in spite of all the conditions so glowingly described, the full cost of the show had been earned back in extra sales by the 17th week. For one very simple reason. Every Saturday night, every salesman and dealer was listening to that show. Every Monday morning, he was out selling, a little harder with a little more self-confidence, because he thought the public had been listening to it too. If your merchandise is right and your price is right, and your salesmen and dealers think your consumer advertising is right, your consumer advertising will be a profitable investment, no matter how bad it is. Bad means ineffective, not immoral. Consumer advertising, which is ineffective on consumers, can still be effective on salesmen and dealers. The recognition of this fact may be termed realistic, sophisticated, or sordid, according to your lights. As businessmen, we should recognize the fact that it is essentially true, that it does give our consumer advertising dollar two chances to be profitable. As copywriters, we suddenly realize that preparing and running our advertisements is sometimes only a small part of our whole job. As copywriters, we do not lose our obligation to try to make our consumer advertising effective for consumers, as well as for salesmen and dealers. The fact that there are many ways, both direct and indirect, in which the copywriter can render specific extra help to the sales department does not in any way lessen the copywriter's primary obligation. Unless every advertisement is honestly addressed to its primary audience, all the rest of our work will be considerably less effective than it could have been. The initial cost of preparing and running an advertising campaign usually runs into big money. By comparison, the cost of using preprints to build dealer push and reprints to increase consumer pull is a matter of pennies. Yet this small added cost may well double the total results. On occasion, it can mean the difference between success and failure. Many a time, the pre-selling of an advertising campaign has produced enough extra sales to pay for the campaign before it was run. To some degree, this business of letting your wholesalers or retailers know what you are doing, advertising-wise, is not wholly selfish. Just as surely as you need them to help you make a sale, they expect you to help them make that sale. Advertising your advertising lets the wholesaler or retailer know just what support you are giving him. He knows just how much support he can count on. He won't be surprised that there is not more. He has a chance to take advantage of all there is. When you advertise your advertising to your prospective customer, you are likewise seeking to get full credit for what you are doing. But with a somewhat different objective. If you start mailing a reprint of each advertisement in your campaign, one reprint at a time as the advertisement appears, the cumulative effect is soon appreciable. In the course of any 12 months, your customers and prospects have heard from you 6, 8, 10, or 12 times. On this basis, they have every reason to believe that yours is a substantial, continuing business, that you believe in your wares, and that you want their patronage. This procedure becomes doubly important if you have a competitor who is strong enough to out-advertise you. Let us suppose that you can afford only 10 advertisements a year while he can afford 60. But let us also suppose that your customers and prospects hear from you 10 times, and from him not at all. Obviously, you have gone a long way to make up in total impressions, at relatively low cost, what you could not possibly have afforded to do dollar-wise. If professional men have a hand in the selection of your product, doctors, architects, etc., show these professional men what you are telling the public about your wares. If you are telling a truthful story, their knowledge of what you are telling may speed the sale. If a doctor knows you are making no false statements, he is less likely to let professional jealousy lead him into panning your wares. If an architect knows about your goods, he may specify them. He will certainly be less inclined to thwart your prospect's specification. If your advertising says that this factory makes good goods, more specifically, if the advertising talks about the quality of the materials or the workmanship which go into the goods, put those advertisements up on bulletin boards throughout the factory. Once upon a time, there was a foundry in which brass castings of high quality were being made. The firm's standards of excellence were so high that practically every third employee was an inspector, rejecting almost half of the products the other two workmen had just made. This was an old established firm. Over many years, every scientific development had been employed to improve the quality of the output. It was natural that these high standards should become part of the advertiser's copy story. The big surprise came when proofs of the advertisements were posted on the factory bulletin boards. Within 6 months, the seconds and rejects had declined by enough to pay for the whole advertising campaign. Once upon a time, new sales promotional methods were introduced into an old chemical firm. The salesmen went out and started selling as they had never sold before. They began to get orders from firms they had never sold before. Suddenly, the salesmen were out in the factory begging the production chiefs to speed up deliveries. The production chiefs led the salesmen over to the bulletin board, pointed out what the advertisement said about the unvarying standards to which these chemical products were made. They said, "We know it's a big victory that you have finally sold the Smith Company, but you know that the real proof of the pudding is whether they reorder. Only the quality of our goods will get the reorder. and only when our goods are up to our advertised standards will we ship your order. There are other boards on which advertisements often need to be posted. Once upon a time, a somewhat elderly firm found itself politically divided into four camps: the laboratory, the factory, the sales staff, and the office staff. Each was against the other three. Advanced proofs of a new advertising campaign were placed on the desk of every salesman, on the bulletin boards seen by the office staff, and on additional bulletin boards in the laboratory and in the factory. An important part of the copy story was the long tradition and the years of pioneering back of today's products. No other overt act occurred. Yet slowly but surely the four teams became once again one army. That's it for today. If you enjoyed this video, you might want to check our link in the description, where you'll find many other fundamental advertising books in different languages. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more persuasion and marketing-related content. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again in the next video.